depressing part. Thank you. There's the recording. Thank you, Rachel. So we're heading into this very depressing part of the musical. Everyone's going to die. And the first to die will be Eponine. She will be the first to die on the barricade. And that's what I think it's, Enjolras says that after her death, she is the first to die on this barricade. And it's sort of a very sobering moment for the students. We had heard a little bit of that last time with Red and Black, right? This is not a game. This is not just going to the opera now. This is, we could all give our lives to this. So now sort of, this is where they're facing reality for the first time. So we are going to, for the next number of weeks, listen to some very sad songs. It'll probably bring us through to Pesach, and then on the other side of Pesach, we'll finish the musical and we'll redeem it somehow, and they'll live happily ever after. So just know that we'll get to the other side of this. But I found this really hard to listen to, given everything that's happening right now in Ukraine. And so I want to dedicate our class and our learning today to healing and safety and peace for all of those whose lives are hanging in the balance, both those who are fighting in Ukraine and those who are refugees who are trying to find a safe haven. We're thinking of them, and we wish comfort to the families who have lost loved ones. We wish refuah shalema, healing to those who need it. And may we hear better news out of that part of the world. So the song is called A Little Fall of Rain. This is the song that just, I mean, it makes me weep. I can't listen through it. It's Eponine's death. And remember, Eponine is sort of a nobody. She is the daughter of the innkeeper and his wife. She grew up sort of alongside Cosette when Cosette was living with the innkeeper, but then of course Cosette is taken into Jean Valjean's care, and Eponine, you know, she stays this poor girl who makes her way on the streets and who is incredibly smart and resourceful, and she ends up fighting alongside the students. She, if you may recall, she dresses up like a man in order to be allowed to fight. She is in love with Marius, but knows that he'll never be hers. He's from another world, another socioeconomic part of the city. So she is a tragic character, and here is her tragic death. There's a little bit of this redemptiveness in this song, A Little Fall of Rain, because all she's ever wanted is to be in Marius's arms. And now in her dying breath, she gets to, you know, she gets to be with him. And you can see that she gets a little taste of that sweetness that she never got in her life, she gets in her death. So a little fall of rain is that, you know, don't worry, I'm not in pain. A little fall of rain can hardly hurt me now. I'm here. That's all you need to know. And you'll keep me safe. And you know, rain, of course, Marius says the rain is blessing, and the rain will heal you. And of course, rain is a sign of blessing, but it's also here a sign of tragedy. So I'm going to stop talking about the song and just play the song. And where we'll go with it is actually looking at, I found a really interesting article that looks at battlefield deaths in the Jewish tradition and shows that we don't valorize dying in battle the way that maybe some other cultures do. We don't want to give our lives on the battlefield. Sometimes we have to, but the battles that we fight are battles of self-defense, and heroes that we mourn who die in battle, we don't valorize their death. We actually wish they would live. So it's an interesting opportunity to just consider what it means to die in battle in our Jewish tradition. We're going to watch the 10th anniversary version because, as many other parts, you know, the movie version, we'll watch it at the end, but the movie version cuts up the song, doesn't give us the full song. So we want the full song of the musical here, which is what we'll get with Lea Salonga playing Eponine, just beautifully. Here we go.
Don't you fret, Monsieur Marius, I don't feel any pain. A little fall of rain can hardly hurt me now. You're here, that's all I need to know. And you will keep me safe, and you will keep me close, and rain will make the flowers grow.
But you will live, Ponine, dear God above. If I could heal your wounds with words of love.
Just hold me now and let it be. Shelter me, comfort me.
You would live 100 years if I could show you how. I won't desert you now.
Rain can't hurt me now. This rain will wash away what's past, and you will keep me safe, and you will keep me close. I'll sleep in your embrace at last. The rain that brings you here is heaven blessed. The skies begin to clear and I'm at rest. A breath away from where you are. I've come home from so far. So don't you fret, Monsieur Marius.
You
Don't
won't feel any pain.
A little fall of rain
Can hardly hurt you now. I'm here.
That's all I need to know. And you will
Stay
keep
with you
me safe,
till you are
and you will keep me close. And rain, make the flowers.
make the flowers.
Ooh, it's a tough one. And where this comes in the musical is that, you know, they've been full of pride and honor and almost this foolish sort of confidence.
As conflict and tragedy strike
Oh,
Ukraine,
I'm so sorry. One
the
minute.
world is
My
watching and
YouTube
worrying.
videos are still playing. Okay. This confidence in themselves, and then one of them gets shot, and it obviously puts a damper on all of their plans. It sobers them, and they realize that this is not a kid's play. This is real life. So, you know, there's this tension when someone gives their life for a noble cause, because we want to honor their memory. We want to say they didn't die in vain. And yet it's not an ideal. So we're going to be looking, I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat this time, actually. The first thing I'm going to put in the chat is a link toward to an article on a wonderful, if a little bit controversial website called thetorah.com. It takes Torah and Bible narratives and presents them in light of academic Bible scholarship. So it's written by people who care about the Bible as a religious book and also endeavor to bridge the religious study of the Bible with academic sources. You know, the academics will say, well, there were multiple authors of the Bible and so on. So it's a group of people who are trying to kind of thread that needle and not be afraid to talk in terms of academics and to compare sometimes our Jewish texts to other ancient texts. So this article, I'm playing with maybe putting it in at the end. Okay, I'm going to put it in our chat, but don't get lost in it right now. I just wanted to acknowledge this article because I did take some of these ideas directly from here. And it contrasts the way that the Bible refers to dying in battle and the way that other sort of contemporaneous texts talked about dying in battle. So for example, in Athens and in the Epic of Gilgamesh, like some of these other ancient texts, people are valorized and it would be noble and honorable to die in battle, and we would rather die in battle than die a kind of a lame and peaceful death. But what we'll read, and I just put the text from Sepharia text source sheet in the chat. What we'll read are the Jewish texts that do not valorize dying in battle. So I did start with a brief quote from the Epic of Gilgamesh, that Babylonian ancient epic that I don't know about you, but I studied in undergrad as part of our core curriculum. And I'm quoting Professor Jacob Wright, who's the author of that article I mentioned, because he shows the way that these other ancient texts show that that it's a great thing to die in battle. We all wish to die in battle. That's not what the Jewish texts will say. So this is him sort of narrating what's happening. Before battling a monster, Gilgamesh declaims, "If I should fall in battle, I will have nonetheless made my name to stand." So in other words, it would be good if I died in battle because that gets me a good name in history. In contrast, he says, Gilgamesh's friend Enkidu complains that he is forced to die peaceably, a death unbecoming a great warrior. And then here's the quote. Then he called to Gilgamesh, "My friend, the great goddess cursed me, and I must die in shame. I shall not die like a man fallen in battle. I feared to fall, but happy is the man who falls in battle, for I must die in shame." So again, this is not a Jewish text. This is another ancient text, which helps us see how unique the Jewish texts are. Because in other ancient texts, people might say something like this: "I wish I could die in battle, but Nebuch, I'm dying in peace." And what we're going to look at is the story of a battle in death, that is the death of Shaul, King Saul, and the way that King David mourns King Saul, who died in battle, and the way that we would always prefer that people died a noble death in peace and not a violent death in battle. And so again, as I said, we see it in Les Mis. We want to honor those who died in battle, but we also don't want to hold them, on a higher level or on a pedestal. We don't want people to run out to battle and get killed. So this is the beginning of 2 Samuel, as we call it, Shmuel Bet. And this is where David gets the news that Saul has died. And remember, David and Saul didn't get along so great. Saul was jealous of David, tried to kill David, but Saul is in battle. And there's the whole backstory, which we haven't looked at, but essentially Saul is practically dead lying, dying, and a young man comes and helps him die, like finishes him off. David gets very mad at him for that, even though he was just trying to put Saul out of his suffering. So you'll see, like we would never want someone to die a violent death is basically the message of this text. So a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes rent. That means his clothing was torn in mourning. Earth on his head, ashes on his head means also a sign of mourning. And he comes to David. That means immediately David knows this is bad news. So verse 3, I'm picking up in the Hebrew here with Gimel. Vayomer lo David, Emi zet tavo. Where are you coming from? What happened? Vayomer elav mimachane Yisrael nimlatati. I fled the camp of Israel, meaning the army camp, the military camp. Vayomer elav David, mehaya hadavar. What happened? Tell me. Hagen ali. Vayomer asher nas ha'am min hamilchama. The troops had fled from battle, and many had died. Gam harbei nafal min ha'am. Vayamutu gam Shaul v'Yonatan. Oh, sorry. Nafal min ha'am vayamutu. Many had fallen and died. And Shaul and Yonatan, his son, metu, are also dead. And he says, how do you know? And I want to skip down because I want to make sure to get to a few other texts, but how do you know? Oh, it's because I was there, and he begged me because he was suffering, stand over me, finish me off. I'm barely alive, finish me off. And so he says, I did that. I knew that he was basically going to die. So in verse 10, Yud, va'emod alav va'amotetehu, I killed him, ki adat. I knew that these were fatal wounds, right? It's making me think about, Marius standing over Eponine, and even though he says, but you will live, Penine, dear God above, it doesn't really mean you will live. You would live if I could close your wounds with words of love, right? So we know that she's at her end, and he just wants to comfort her, to make it easier for the dying. So he says, I took my spear and finished him off, and then took his crown and his armlet. So his kind of royal garb, I took these because to show you, like, the king is dead. And David now moves into a state of mourning when he hears this news. So, that tearing of garment that we do, Nebuch, if someone loses a loved one, we do it standing there in paper mints. People tear the tie or the scarf or their whatever garment they might be wearing. In the ancient world, that tearing of garments was done in the moment you first heard the news that your loved one had passed. And one would tear for a leader, even if they weren't an immediate family member. So he tears his clothes immediately, and everyone there tears their clothing. And then I've underlined this, the focus here is a lament. Vayispidu, vayivku, and they cried. Vayatsumu at ha'arav, they fasted that day. Al Shaul, ve'al Yonatan beno, ve'al Am Hashem, ve'al Beit Yisrael. They're mourning for Saul, for his son Jonathan, for the nation of God, and for all the house of Israel. So this is a tragedy for everyone who had fallen kinaflu becharev. That's what we do. We don't praise him. We simply mourn him. We don't say, oh, what a hero, he died so heroically. We don't do that. We just mourn. And it's especially sort of glaring that this kind of valorization is absent, again, because we see in other cultures it would have been different. This response would have been like, oh, he has such a good name, he died in battle. So I want to skim through, then what happens is David says, you idiot, you killed a king of God. I don't care, who you are. He's a Na'ar Amaleki. He happens to be an Amalekite Na'ar boy. That doesn't seem to take on huge significance here, the fact that he's an Amalekite, except that, we have a track record with the Amalek. they're not our closest friends by far. But he simply says, you never raise your hand against the Mashiach Hashem, God's anointed. And so he strikes him down and kills this person who killed the king. So, in many ways, David might be now acting as the new leader and saying, we protect the royal position at any cost. Even if you know the king is about to die, you shouldn't take an active part in that. But again, I just want to emphasize the way then he mourns. This is a very famous line. Hatzvi Yisrael. This is verse 19 where I underlined. The glory of Israel, al bamotecha halal, slain on your bamot, on your high places. Ech naflu giborim, how the mighty have fallen. And of course, that's a phrase. It's a very common phrase. But it's also Hatzvi Yisrael. It's something that became used in some of the memorials in Israel, mourning soldiers who have died in battle. It's interesting, that article that I gave you the link to sort of poses the question of, how come in modern Israel we have sort of started valorizing the dead. We now that we have a state that we defend, and we want people to feel proud to defend, we've slid a little bit away from this really core Jewish ideal, which is that we don't want to die in battle. But again, I think we're trying to thread a needle there. We're trying to strike a very difficult balance, because when someone does die in battle, we do want to say to their family, they didn't die in vain, they are heroes. But here, David mourns, full stop. He mourns who they were, and he mourns these giborim, these mighty, but not because of the way that they have fallen, because of who they are. And this actually was something that in the classic Israeli education that I had from my Israeli Judaics teachers, they make you memorize this. This is one of the things you memorize. Hatzvi Yisrael, al bamotecha halal. The whole thing here, al tagidu begat, al tivasru, like don't go tell this around. Our enemies will mock us. And the even nature should be mourning. We don't want dew or rain. So here, dew and rain are signs of blessing. I'm just skimming through, verse 21 there, you see a reference to a fall of rain, nice little fall of rain, right? And rain is a sign of blessing. So it's like we should refrain from having rain or dew on these mountains of Gilboa, because that's where our mighty have fallen. It's beautiful poetry that David is exalting Shaul and Yonatan. And by the way, we know he was close with Yonatan, but he was enemies with Shaul in some way. And yet he puts them side by side here. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and cherished, never parted in life or in death. So they lived together and they died together. They were swifter than eagles. Minisharim kalu me'arayot gaveru, stronger than lions. And again, this motif, ech naflu giborim, verse 35, how the mighty have fallen, betoch milchama, in the midst of battle. This is where in verse 26, he does give mention to his special relationship with Jonathan, his friendship. Tsar li alecha achi Yehonatan, my brother Jonathan, achi. Na'amta li me'od, you were so dear to me, even more dear than the love of women. Nifleita ahavatcha li me'ahavat nashim. This is where, by the way, some have said, well, maybe they were more than friends. If he's comparing his love of Jonathan to his love of women, did he love Jonathan the way he loved women? It never says that explicitly. There's no way to disprove that, but there's no way to prove it either, other than this line. So, some have theorized, well, maybe the reason he's comparing his love of Jonathan to the love of women is that they had some kind of romantic relationship. We don't know. We could never know. This is the only textual evidence we have. But anyway, in the end, again, it goes back again and again, ech naflu giborim, how the mighty have fallen in war. And we mourn that. We don't make them heroes because of the way they died. They were heroes because of the way they lived. And that's the Jewish way. So we're going to look at a couple of more just very brief texts, which again this author points to not only a battle scene like this, but the way we discuss battle, which is that we'd much rather live than die. We know that Judaism doesn't valorize death, and in fact, if anything, we are a life-affirming religion, and we don't want someone to go to battle if they are in the midst of a very important life moment. So here, at the end of the Torah, so we just kind of did a rewind. We were in the book of Samuel, in the Navi, in the prophets, but we went back to the end of the Torah, to the book of Devarim. And this is where Moses is speaking to the people at the end of his life, right? It's the end of the 40 years in the wilderness. They are about to go into the land of Israel. Moses won't get to take them in, but Joshua will. And it's going to be tough. They're going to have to fight. They're going to fight many wars, only the minimum of what they need to, but they will need to fight against the nations who are there. And so he's laying out some laws of battle. And this is where he says, who should not go out to battle. So there are a few people who are in a state or stage in their life where we do not want them to die in battle, God forbid. We want them to be able to live that phase in life and to embrace everything that life has to offer during that time. So Vidibru HaShotrim, the officials at that time in the future, Moses says, will tell the nation before going to battle, Mi ha'ish, anybody here, asher bana bayit chadash, someone who built a new house, velo chanacho, but didn't get to dedicate it, that means initiate it, live in it. You just finished all the construction on that house, but you haven't moved in. That person, yelech v'yashuv lebeito, go home. Get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Lest he die in battle and not get to enjoy that new house and know that someone else will be. I don't think it's about jealousy, but I think it's about a sense of completion in life and satisfaction for what you earned. And then similarly in verse 6, you planted a new vineyard, you didn't get to harvest it and enjoy it. Don't come out to battle with us. Don't die in this battle. We want you to go home. Someone else might get to eat of your vineyard that you worked hard to plant. And finally, someone who is betrothed. So here the translation is paid the bride price for a wife. So that's a very technical way of saying betrothed. But essentially they committed themselves to this woman, paid signed the ketubah, so to speak, and didn't yet marry lo lekacha into his household. That's also a technical sort of biblical way of saying to take a wife. So they're engaged, but they weren't yet married. Yelech v'yashov leveito, go home, get married, lest he die in battle, pen yamut b'milchama v'ishacher yikachena, and that woman will become someone else's wife. So it has to do with unfinished business and wanting that, we can't control everything, but at least someone should die with some sense of peace. And we don't want, anyone to be a hero. Don't be a hero. Go home, move into your house, harvest your vineyard, marry your betrothed, live a little, because living is more important than dying. If someone has to die in battle, let it not be you today. So, what this is really about is what Judaism values: life over death, home life over public heroism, even. And again, it puts us in conflict, because sometimes we do need to die in battle, and sometimes we're fighting a valorous fight. But Judaism doesn't feel inherently comfortable with that. So before going into battle, we want to make sure that we've taken care of life.
I have a problem with that. I'm raising my hand.
Yes, Gloria, yes.
I really have a problem with that, because it's it's valuing one kind of life over another. What about the person
Yeah.
that never tasted their first love, that,
Yes.
that
Yes.
have aging parents?
Yes.
I'm
It's
having
a rough
difficulty
one.
with that one.
I know.
It's a problem.
I hold that up. Yes. I mean, is it more fair, so to speak, or more moral to just indiscriminately take the first 5,000 troops who show up and not interrogate them? Is it more? So actually, I'll just present another perspective on this, having to do with what happens in the next sentence that we didn't include here, but in the next sentence, it says, or anybody who's afraid. Don't go home if you're too afraid. Which some of the commentaries connect that to here, which is that you're not going to be a good soldier. Let's just be realistic. If you're thinking about that house or that woman or that vineyard, you're not going to fight well, and our army will suffer. Now, I don't know if that redeems this for you. I think you're still, yeah, but it's a different perspective on why they're saying this. They're saying we have to make sure we have good soldiers. We don't want soldiers who are distracted by fear in general or by some other distraction in their life. I don't know what makes a good soldier. I can't imagine. I mean, I'm thinking about these people who can't leave Ukraine, the young men whose wife and children are allowed to leave, but they are forced to stay and fight.
Can I say something?
Please.
I'm just came into my head that maybe it's for the common good, because the harvest that the man didn't do is going to be good for more than just his family. It's not just to complete his wish, but to help the common good, and at the same time help the men that are going in to fight, because they have to be fed too. In the case of the one with the bride, I was always under the impression that it didn't only include the engaged, but the person who just got married and might be starting a family.
Oh, yes. The
And,
first year.
That's another thing for the common good as well as for the individual. So it might, I mean, it's.
You're trying to redeem this. I
A little.
appreciate it. Yes. But what you're saying makes me think of all of the things that men did for society that women couldn't do, that when they went off to war in World War II, women entered the workforce because someone had to be making weapons and someone had to be planting fields and running factories or whatever it was. And it was the beginning of women fully entering a workforce that just needed them. Society needed them. So if it were really about, I don't know, about societal good, could there have been another way?
Not just about societal good, but
Yeah.
maybe a little bit contributing to the society.
Yeah. Right. These aren't just isolated sort of self-serving.
And I also thought that after a year of a man who was married, they had to go into they only didn't have this complete, you don't go to war anymore. You had a certain period of time to adjust to the new situation.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought, that I might be wrong.
Yeah.
But
Pearl
also,
wants to say
yeah,
something.
in terms of fear, I think a good soldier has to have fear, because if you have no fear, you go rashly into battle and you may make all kinds of errors. And the reality is that they have to have fears, and then they're much more careful about what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. David?
Yeah, nobody's mentioned the word freedom and the motive for war. I mean, what was it the man at Tel Hai said? It is, I forgot, was it Trumpledore? Is that something from Harry Potter? I don't know. What was that? Was it Trumpledore?
No, that's Dumbledore, but Trumpledore.
Yeah, it is good to die for your country, he said. Do you remember that?
Say it again. I couldn't hear because of the, say it again.
His dying words were, "It is good to die for your country."
Yes. Okay,
and
so
it
David,
depends, yeah.
This is
it depends if it's a defensive war for freedom or a war for conquest.
Okay, here we go. Here we go, David. You're brilliant. So brilliant that this professor who was writing this article I sent you all the link to, First of all, he's showing a war memorial with our verse in it. Hatzvi Yisrael al bamotecha chalal ich naflu giborim, how the mighty have fallen. But Joseph Trumpeldor, it's so funny, Trumpeldor and Dumbledore rhyme. I'll never forget that now.
Yeah.
The Israeli symbol of self-defense, who was killed defending the settlement of Tel Chai, is remembered as saying, never mind, it is good to die for our country. Ein davar tov lamut be'ad artseinu. He says his statement echoes the famous line from the Latin poet Horace, "'Tis sweet and beautiful to die for one's country." So what he then mentions other war memorials, Arc de Triomphe, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, so he makes sure, yes, he's mentioning this hero, Trumpeldor, is the symbol of self-defense. He was killed in a battle of self-defense, and that in general is the ethic of the Israeli army. We fight only for self-defense, and we don't attack, and we don't. And if you read about this terrible terrorist attack just yesterday in Beersheba, and I was reading about this civilian who was a bus driver and ran off the bus and killed the terrorist. He said, I didn't want to kill him. He was a human being too. And I told him several times, put down your knife, put down your knife. And he lunged at him with a knife again. And if you put down your knife, I won't shoot you. And he said, no. And so I had to shoot him and kill him. It is always in self-defense that we kill. But
well, that's in the title of the army, Israel Defense Forces.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Exactly. But again, what I think he's saying is that it's very hard to be very, very consistently that way when you have then someone who dies, and we want to say they died for our country. Like we do want to say these soldiers were heroes. So how can we say they were heroes, but only self-defense heroes? So I'm just saying it's a very, very hard balance to strike. And what this author is showing is that if you go to the earliest biblical texts, we never wanted to die in battle. And even the warning before war, this is our verse that we just, everything we just read about someone who built a new house, who planted a vineyard, et cetera, it's because we always will put home life first. So even in the context of battle preparations here, I'm going to read right here. Even in this context of battle preparations at the bottom of the page here, nothing is said about heroic death, while much is said about family life. So that's his point here. What do we hope for? What do we consider a hero? The warrior at home, right? Fighting for the survival of his family, building a house, planting a vineyard, marrying, procreation, all of these things, as we're saying, are really that's what makes the Jewish hero. I wanted to show, I'll stay here in this article because I don't need to jump back. I'll just show you what I'm sorry, I know this makes it blurry. You know what, I am going to go back because it's too long here. He mentions that the word chayal means a warrior, right? A chayal is someone who is a soldier. But the word chayil or chayil brings to mind eshet chayil, right? A woman of valor. And in the book of Ruth, not only is she called eshet chayil at the end, but at the bottom here in our sheet, where we meet Boaz, he's called Ish Gibor Chayil. Ish Gibor Chayil, a warrior man, but he is not a fighter. He is a very peaceable man. He owns vineyards. He's very charitable and generous. And what makes him Chayal, a warrior, in the book of Ruth, is his chesed. It's like taking that word and turning it on its head. And later in the book also it's ve'aseh chayil be'efrata, like do chayal, do some heroic actions, again in reference to kindness. So we should all be warriors of kindness, not warriors of battle. Yes, I saw Naomi's comment in the chat, building our future, not building our armies. Yes. So when we, and it's interesting because when we sing this Eshet Chayil, we're not talking about a woman who is literally out in battle. The women weren't, but she is fighting for her family. She's providing for her family. She's giving charity and, providing for those in need. That's the kind of Chayalim we want. Those are the soldiers we would much rather be, rather than the ones dying on the battlefield. That's valor in Jewish values. Yes, David. You're muted though.
Yes.
There
I
we go.
just wanted to mention the opposite of that, which is the Palestinians. When their terrorists murder somebody, they become martyrs and heroes.
Yeah, they
And
praise
based
them.
on hate.
Yes, for an offensive attack, not even, yeah. Thank you. That's terrible.
I have something to say.
Harry, go ahead.
I just watched Hamilton over the last few days.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he wanted to die in battle, and
Right. Thank you. That's a good connection.
He left his beautiful wife and children, and and went out for the draw. That was more important to him, his legacy.
Yeah. Actually, there's a part there where George Washington yells at him for that, because Hamilton keeps saying,
right.
I want to, if I can die in battle, I'll make a name for myself. And he says, dying is easy, living is harder.
Right.
Oh, Max just got that too. Thank you, Max.
And I think about Jacob and
George
Esau.
Washington sends him home for his son's birth. Exactly. Go home and live.
I think about Jacob and Esau also. He was the warrior, and he
Right.
wasn't the going to lead the Jewish people, and Jacob was the
So
home
the Jewish heroes are the peaceful ones, not the fighters. And even in some of these wars that are described, he mentions in the book of Joshua, it's like he has to encourage the people to fight sometimes, but he never encourages the soldiers to die a noble death. And he never talks about those who died as heroes. So sometimes we need to fight, but we'd rather, again, as we've been saying, we'd rather live. So actually that was the last text I wanted to show you. So we looked at the story of Saul and Jonathan, Shaul and Yonatan dying as heroes in their life. They fell as heroes, but they were just simply mourned, not valorized. And we looked at the way that Moses prepares the nation for battle. And I hear you, Gloria. It's a tough text.
No, I just wanted to add one thing. I think the
Yes,
notion
please.
of dying as a hero is kind of a human invention to comfort the family that is left
Right.
behind.
Yeah. As I said,
Much more than saying
we
this
didn't
person
die
is
in
more of a
vain.
hero than anyone else that was fighting on the battlefield.
Yeah.
They're all risking their lives, but it comforts the mourners at some level. I mean, the loss is tremendous, but when they can sort of wear their badge of courage, my son died a hero, it's sick, but that's what.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's why it's important to compare what is said before battle and what is said after. What's said before is, we want you all to come back. And we don't say, whoever goes out there and dies, we will exalt you. We don't say that.
To add to what Gloria was saying, the United States, they have the Gold Star families,
Right. So after the fact, if someone dies, we honor them.
I think it depends greatly on the motivation for the war. I mean, if people are trying to save their lives in their country, I'd call them heroes. If they're trying to make conquest and conquer another country, I'd call them monsters.
Right. It's the difference between Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly.
And look, I feel bad for some of those Russian soldiers who don't have a choice. who, I mean, apparently the morale is low. Most of them, I can't say all of them, I don't know, but most of them have no choice to follow orders, and they're people too. But yes, their country is on the offensive, and they're not heroes. Yeah. Oish.
And close to 10,000 have died.
It's tragic. It's just terrible. I hope that we'll watch the song one more time. We'll watch the film version. It's very hard, but maybe it can help us put a face to these tragedies, because these numbers are just mind-boggling. But each one of them is an Eponine, right? As our tradition teaches us, he who saves a single life is as if he saved an entire world. And when we lose a single life, we lose an entire world. So the scope of the tragedy is really tremendous. I know that I saw the Federation is organizing a day for Ukraine next week. I just saw this email come through. So it's a day for, sending money and support and everything that we can do. It feels like we can't do enough, but we're thinking of them. So is there any other comment or observation that anyone wanted to say before I play the song again and we weep? Anything else? I'm sorry. The whole idea of starting this class was to bring a little joy during a dark time. But this is life, right? This is what we've got. And in some ways, actually, I guess this is the right song to listen to right now when we're watching this news. This is what we're seeing. So
to say, maybe you should do Encanto next.
I was actually just telling my daughter, she said, can I be on your podcast? Because I've got, of the podcast, we just actually released a new episode yesterday. We're doing a mini series in building up to Passover. So I said, oh, maybe I'll do a Disney series and I'll start with Encanto and you could be on my podcast. That was my 8-year-old Hadar. I could do Encanto. I was thinking though, like I'll see this class through this year, but I think I'm going to call it, a close by the end of this season, because I'm running out of musicals. I'll never run out of musicals, but I want it to stay fresh. Once I've done Les Mis, I mean, there's nowhere to go. Maybe Encanto, we could do a mini series. We don't talk about what we don't talk about, right? We don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about who. We shake our groggers at him. That would be a good one, actually. That's not bad. Okay, Terry, you've convinced me. We'll finish out Les Mis. We'll end the year with Encanto. And then I have some ideas for a next class. All right, so thank you. We'll listen one more time. As I said, we'll listen to the movie version. Give me a moment just to pull it up. Eddie Redmayne is just a phenomenal Marius, and Samantha Barks is the Eponine. This excerpt seems to be the full battle scene. I think it's longer, but the song is a shortened version of the song. So unfortunately, you'll see her die. Oish. And we'll pray for no more deaths. Here we go. I apologize, it's on YouTube, so I never know if there's going to be like an ad pop up. I really hope it doesn't in the middle of this song. Here we go.
Fall back! Fall back or I blow the barricade! Blow it up and take yourself with it!
Christ. And myself with it.
Back! Back! What were you thinking, Marius? You could have gotten us all killed!
Marius, you saved us all.
Eponine,
What are you doing?
I kept it from you. It's from Cosette. I'm sorry.
What have you done?
Don't you fret, Monsieur Marius. I don't feel any pain. A little fall of rain can hardly hurt me now. You're here. That's all I need to know. And you will keep me safe. And you will keep me close. And rain will make the flowers grow.
But you will live, Pauline, dear God above. If I could close your wounds with words of love.
Just hold me now and let it be. Shelter me, comfort me.
Hush, goodbye,
So don't you fret,
dear
Monsieur
Evelyn.
Marius. I don't
Don't
feel any pain.
A little fall of rain can hardly hurt you now. I'm here.
That's all I need to know. You
And I will stay with you
be safe.
till you are
And you will keep me
sleeping.
close. And rain
And rain
will make the flowers
will make the flowers grow.
So I guess they wanted to make it a shorter death scene. They don't have the whole long drawn out song, but it's very sad. Well, we're gonna stay on this barricade for a little while longer, but I promise you next week.
You're going to need a suit.
Oh my gosh, my YouTube kept going. Next week we'll do a beautiful song. It's a song of prayer. It's the song called "Bring Him Home."
Oh, yeah.
So that's the song that Jean Valjean sings to protect Marius. So it will be a little more healing and hopeful, I hope. So in the meantime, I wish you a healthy week, a week of peace and better news, and rain that makes the flowers grow.
Tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. That's true.
Thank you.
But you